I'm Ms. Winters, and this is Multiple Intelligences number 2. I'm getting ready to create a blog post that goes with this particular lesson, and that address is anecdotes.typepad.com. And let me begin by saying that I need to give credit to my 14-year-old granddaughter, Parker, who helped me set up a YouTube channel yesterday. She helped me with the introduction, created a thumbnail, and she even knows how to put those little things back here. That's why I'm sitting over here to the side, so that she can put things like this back here and make it a little bit more savvy. But until then, we're going to do it like this. Take advantage of having those children who are underfoot 24/7 in your house to learn from them. They have a lot of things they can teach you. And so she taught me so much yesterday, I couldn't believe it. So if you don't understand something about a computer or a phone or whatever, ask a kid. They can do it. I want to answer some questions that came, just to start off. One was, if your name is Kathy Schmult, why are you calling yourself Ms. Winters? Short story. Most of my teaching career, I was Mrs. Winters, Ms. Winters. And when I remarried, we came back to the town where I did most of my teaching, and I would see former students and their parents, and it would be, hey, Ms. Winters, hey, Ms. Winters. So my current husband started calling me Ms. Winters, among other things. So that's why I'm calling myself Ms. Winters. I was Ms. Winters for a long time, and I will always be, as a teacher, Ms. Winters. Another question was, someone mentioned they detected a drawl. And where was I from? I'm from Oklahoma. And to be more specific, I'll tell you this story. If you take Oklahoma and lop off the panhandle and give it to Kansas or Colorado or Texas or whoever, you have a semblance of a rectangle. You divide it into fourths, and you have the upper northeastern quadrant, and they'll call their neighbor and say, you all's cow is in my garden. And then you have the northwestern part, and they'll call their neighbor and say, y'all's cow is in my garden. And then you have that lower southwestern part of Oklahoma, and they'll call their neighbor and say, Ewens's cow is in my garden. Now understand, Ewens's is y'all plus 3. And the part of Oklahoma I'm from calls the neighbor and says, hey, your cow is in my garden. I just shot it. Come on over for barbecue. So that's where the drawl comes from, southeastern Oklahoma. The other thing I want to talk about before we get started is someone asked, will you be doing activities with children? Yes, I will. But right now, I want to lay a foundation for the parents to set up what the basis of this is the 8 multiple intelligences. So we'll get through all 8 of these very quickly, and then once we do that, then I will start doing activities with children. The first objective today, in my neck of the woods, we call it what we gonna do is. So what we gonna do is today is review yesterday and see how far along you got with the 3 intelligence that we started with. You need a chart. You can just put it on a piece of paper and stick it on the refrigerator if you have a whiteboard, but it's very easy to keep up with what they're learning and what you're teaching and what you're learning, because you're going to learn a lot too, and you'll find that during the day you're going to be thinking in these 8 categories. So make sure you have a chart if you're wanting to follow along with this, and this is on the blog. The next thing is, we talked about Verbal-Linguistic, is that you're reading a book. And if you have a 10-year-old who's in 4th grade and 40 minutes seems like a long time, if they read 20 minutes yesterday, have them read 25 today. Go in increments of 5 minutes maybe and work up to that 40 minutes, because that is a long time for a child who is not accustomed to sitting at home for 40 minutes reading. Now at school, that doesn't seem to be a problem with that, but at home, if they're not structured to read 40 minutes a day, yeah, you may be having a little kickback from them on that. We talked about Naturalist and taking pictures. I hope you went out and took a picture of a tree or a flower or a shrub. Wait a few days, go back, take a picture from that same vantage point, and talk about the changes. That's your Naturalist Intelligence. The other one was the Intrapersonal, which is the self-smart, starting a journal. And I talked about the easiest way is an ABC journal. And so I just listed the ABCs, and have your children do that. Don't do that for them. And notice across the top I have written out the date, spelling out the month, putting a comma behind the day, because as we know, those kids are tested, and I can guarantee you somewhere on one of those tests they're going to need to know how to write that date and where does that comma go. So just get in the habit of having them write out the month. They'll learn to spell all 12 eventually. You'll have first graders. They know how to spell November. So today I just jotted in J for journal, P for photographed tree, S for Sacker, as in Lewis, W, the book we're reading, Wayside School, Beneath the Cloud of Doom. That's his new book. If you're not familiar with the Wayside books, and I was, because I taught at Wayside School, so these books, I'm very fond of these books in Lewis Sacker. And one thing I added is, if you want them writing in sentences, you might have them at the bottom of their journal, right? The best part of today was, and one thing I like about myself. They need to think about what they like about themselves. And there's so many things, so many sentences they can write. So if you're wanting them to write in sentences rather than just words, there you go. So we'll get started today. Before we add the multiple intelligence for today, which is musical-rhythmical, I want to read you a story. It's called Purple. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up. That's Pablo Picasso's quote. In first grade, Mr. Lohr said my purple teepee wasn't realistic enough, that purple was no color for a tent, that purple was a color for people who died, that my drawing wasn't good enough to hang with the others. I walked back to my seat, counting the swish, swish, swishes of my baggy corduroy trousers. With a black crayon, nightfall came to my purple tent in the middle of an afternoon. In second grade, Mr. Bartas said, "Draw anything." He didn't care what. I left my paper blank, and when he came around to my desk, my heart beat like a tom-tom, while he touched my head with his big hand and in a soft voice said, "The snowfall, how clean and white and beautiful. You are a wonderful artist." Today we're going to talk about musical-rhythmical. And I will go into detail on all the intelligences at a later time, but right now we're just going to touch on musical-rhythmical today. How many of you have ever heard a song and you flash back to where you were back in high school, or the first time you heard that song, or what you were wearing the first time you heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand"? Music has a way of connecting you with your feelings and with memories. And I call that the Velcro method of teaching and learning, is that when we have something, an old learning, and we have a new learning, and it attaches to that old learning, it's like Velcro, and it sticks. And so you can use old learning to teach something new. And music is one of the most wonderful ways to teach, especially for math. Music affects our moods. It can make a person feel happy, enchanted, inspired, wistful, excited, empowered, comforted, heroic. it just has a way of moving us. Armies have marched to war to music. We've lulled our babies to sleep with lullabies. Stories have been handed down from generations through chants. We've communicated with drums. So music is an integral part of our lives, and it can be one of your activities during the day that can be very significant with you and your children. I suggest that you choose a genre, a new one, not songs that they listen to all the time, but choose something new. Classical, jazz, blues, country, patriotic songs, ragtime piano, an Indian flute, Gregorian chants, Latin pop, Broadway hits. Just choose one genre, choose one song, and listen to it today. Now, Howard Gardner says that just listening to music doesn't really fit the bill for teaching music. So what I suggest is, for instance, my students loved Ludwig van Beethoven. They loved Moonlight Sonata. That was Piano Sonata number 14. So if you choose, say, Beethoven, learn something about Beethoven. For instance, did you know that he dipped his head in cold water before he composed? He did that lots of times. He was losing his hearing when he was 26, and by the time he died, he was totally deaf. His handwriting was so bad that musicologists had a hard time authenticating that it was really Beethoven's music. So if you listen to Moonlight Sonata or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, learn something about him. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be classical. The artist, the composer, the guitarist, you can add to just listening to music with one short little lesson about that song, who wrote it, who sang it, and that's a whole lesson right there. One of the quotes that I like that go along with this lesson is from Albert Einstein, and it's, "A healing breeze of sound. There are two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle." And I think I forgot to do my quote yesterday. So yesterday's quote on lesson number 1 is, they give credit to Plato. So let's say Plato said this: "I can learn more about a man in an hour of play than in a year of conversation." So today's assignment is choose a genre of music that you and your children aren't necessarily accustomed to listening to. Choose one song and sit down and just listen to it. It may be 5 minutes long, it may be 3 minutes long. But then have some kind of structured activity. Your child may be able to play this on the piano or on the flute or on the guitar. You can modify these lessons to reach any age child, whether they're a 2-year-old or a 17-year-old. That's up to you to modify those lessons. So today's multiple intelligence is musical-rhythmical, and we will continue with lesson number 3 tomorrow. Parker's going to help me get this on YouTube and maybe add some new things to it. So hopefully it gets better as we go along. I'm having fun. This is keeping me from going stir crazy while I'm sheltering in, and hopefully giving back to some of my favorites who have already contacted me: Mindy, Jennifer, Jill, Brooke. Yeah, Brooke's here. But if we can find something good out of this, let's look for it. And the good I'm feeling right now is that I'm getting connected with some of my students that I have not seen or heard from in years. So I'm loving this. I hope you don't have to do this. It's not a curriculum that everybody likes, but if it sparks one little idea that helps you along the way, I've done my job today. See you tomorrow.